the massive steel doors of the Galactic Council's Emergency Command Center slid open with a sharp hiss. Commander Zelok rushed inside, his forearms clutching data tablets that glowed with urgent red warnings. The circular chamber filled with representatives from dozens of worlds, all speaking at once in their native tongues until the central translator kicked in. "Silence," boomed Admiral Krex, his tentacles slapping against the command podium. "Commander Zelok, report." Zelok's breathing was heavy as he activated the main display screen. Images of twisted metal and shattered buildings filled the room. "The mining colony on Kepler 442b has gone dark. Sir, complete communication blackout as of 4 hours ago." A collective gasp rose from the assembled delegates. Kepler 442b was one of their most productive mining worlds, home to over 8,000 beings from 17 different species. The crystalline deposits there powered half the sector's energy needs. "Equipment failure?" asked Delegate Vorth, her scaled hide shifting colors with anxiety. "No, ma'am," Zilek's voice trembled. "Before communications ceased, we received several distress signals. The final transmission." He paused, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Perhaps you should hear it yourself." The room grew silent as static filled the air, followed by panicked voices speaking in Universal Standard. Day 3 of the attacks. "The creature has destroyed our main power grid and breached the outer defensive walls. It's not just destroying randomly, it's learning. Every trap we set, every weapon we use, it adapts. It studies our defenses and finds ways around them within hours." Background screams and explosions punctuated the message. "The beast is massive, at least 4 meters tall, covered in black scales that deflect our plasma weapons. Its eyes, they burn like golden fire, and when it looks at you, you can see intelligence there. Terrible, calculating intelligence." Another voice cut in, younger and more frightened. "It's not acting like a wild animal. It moves with purpose, targets specific systems. The communication arrays went first, then the transport ships, now the defensive installations. It's trapping us here deliberately." The final words came through heavy static, sending this on emergency backup power. "The beast has learned to mimic our technology. It used our own mining equipment against us today. If anyone receives this, do not send a rescue team, send everything you have. This thing doesn't just want to kill us, it wants to prove it's superior." The transmission ended with a sound that made everyone in the chamber shudder a deep, resonant call that seemed to vibrate through the speakers and into their bones. Admiral Krex's tentacles curled tightly around his command console. "Since that message, 18 hours, sir, we've sent 3 probe ships to investigate, to never reported back. The third managed to send a single image before it was destroyed." The display screen flickered, showing a grainy photograph taken from orbit. In the center of what had once been the mining colony's main plaza stood a creature that defied classification. Even from the satellite's distant view, its immense size was obvious. The black scales covering its body reflected the twin suns like polished armor, and though the image was unclear, 2 golden points of light marked where its eyes should be. "By the void," whispered Delegate Morin, her insectoid features twitching with fear. "What is that thing?" "We've designated it the Warbeast," Zilek replied. "Our xenobiologists have never seen anything like it. The few survivors who escaped in the initial chaos described it as moving with mechanical precision. It doesn't just attack, it systematically dismantles everything it encounters, as if testing the limits of our technology." General Thomases, a battle-scarred veteran from the Andorian campaigns, stood up slowly, his artificial legward as he walked to the display. "You said it learns. How quickly?" "According to the reports, it adapted to our plasma weapons within the first day. By the second day, it had figured out how to turn our mining equipment into weapons against us. The final reports mentioned it using our own gravitational manipulators to collapse buildings." The room erupted in frightened chatter. Never before had they encountered a creature that could not only resist their technology but actively learn from it and turn it against them. Admiral Krex slammed his command staff against the floor, calling for order. "What about the colonists? How many escaped?" "Less than 200 managed to reach the evacuation ships before the beast destroyed the spaceport. The rest, Zilek's voice trailed off. 8,000 beings," Delegate Vorth said quietly. "Families, children, workers, who just wanted peaceful lives." The weight of the loss settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket, but worse than the grief was the fear. If this creature could single-handedly destroy one of their most fortified colonies, what would stop it from doing the same to other worlds? "We need to act quickly," General Thomases declared, "before it learns how to leave the planet." As the Galactic Council began planning their response, none of them knew that on the far side of Kepler 442b, in a small settlement beyond their charts, 300 humans were going about their daily lives, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the fields of New Sol Colony as Dr. Hannah checked the soil moisture levels in her vegetable garden. The quiet settlement had been her family's home for 7 years now, ever since they had chosen to leave the crowded space stations and find peace on this distant world. 300 humans called this place home, living simple lives far from the politics and conflicts of the galaxy. Her daughter Myra sat nearby, feeding scraps to their small flock of Earth chickens that had adapted well to the alien environment. The 7-year-old girl hummed softly as she worked, her dark hair catching the light as she moved between the birds with gentle confidence. These chickens, along with a few goats and the settlement's 3 dogs, were the colony's only animals aside from the native creatures that roamed the forests. "Mama, do you think the chickens understand when I talk to them?" Myra asked, scratching the feathers of a particularly friendly hen. Hannah smiled at her daughter's question. "I think all animals understand more than we realize. They listen to our voices, watch our movements, learn what we mean even without words." Across the settlement, June worked in the communication center, a small building that housed their basic radio equipment. As the colony's elected leader, he kept track of their supplies, weather patterns, and the occasional message from other human settlements on distant worlds. Today, like most days, the radio was quiet except for routine weather updates and farming reports. The colony existed in peaceful isolation. They had chosen to stave off the Galactic Council's official charts, wanting nothing more than to grow their crops, raise their children, and live without the complications of interstellar politics. Most galactic species barely knew humans existed, and the colonists preferred it that way. Myra finished feeding the chickens and wandered over to where COK was repairing one of their farming machines. The middle-aged engineer had gentle hands and infinite patience for curious children. He often let Myra help with simple repairs, teaching her how machines worked and why they sometimes broke down. "Uncle COK, why do you always talk to the machines when you fix them?" Myra asked, handing him a wrench. SCOK chuckled. "Because everything responds better when you treat it with respect. Machines, animals, people, they all work better when they feel valued." He tightened a bolt carefully. "Your grandmother used to say that the secret to fixing anything was to understand what it needed, not just what was broken." The afternoon passed peacefully until the ground began to shake. At first, it felt like the minor earthquakes that sometimes occurred near the crystal formations deep underground. But this was different, rhythmic, deliberate, like massive footsteps approaching from a great distance. Hannah looked up from her garden, dirt still clinging to her hands. The chickens had gone silent, huddling together nervously. Even the colony's dogs seemed unsettled, whimpering and looking toward the eastern horizon. "Did you feel that?" called Jin, one of their farmers from across the field. The tremors grew stronger. June emerged from the communication center, his face puzzled. "I'm picking up some strange sounds on the long-range sensors. Something big is moving toward us." The colonists began gathering in the central square, their faces showing concern, but not panic. They had dealt with dangerous native creatures before, large predators that occasionally wandered near the settlement. Their standard procedure was to make noise, show unified strength, and wait for the animals to move on to easier hunting grounds. But as the tremors intensified, they realized this was something far beyond their previous experience. The sound reached them first, a deep, resonant call that seemed to vibrate through the earth itself. It was unlike anything in their database of native creatures. Then they saw it. A massive silhouette appeared on the horizon, moving with slow, deliberate steps. Even from a distance, they could see it was enormous, taller than their tallest building, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. As it drew closer, details became visible that made their hearts race. The creature was covered in scales that gleamed like polished black metal in the afternoon sun. Its limbs were thick and powerful, ending in claws that could easily tear through their settlement's walls. But most striking were its eyes, 2 golden orbs that seemed to burn with an inner fire, scanning the human settlement with unmistakable intelligence. "Stay calm," June called out, though his own voice shook slightly. "Everyone stay together, but don't run. Sudden movements might trigger a hunting response." Dr. Hannah felt her scientific mind racing, even as maternal instincts made her pull Myra closer. This creature was unlike anything in their colonial database. Its behavior seemed almost curious rather than immediately aggressive. It paused at the settlement's edge, studying their buildings and their people with tilted head movements that suggested evaluation rather than hunger. Myra pressed against her mother's side, but her eyes remained fixed on the magnificent beast. While the adults whispered nervously and prepared for potential evacuation, the child noticed something they missed. The way the creature held itself, the careful placement of its massive feet to avoid stepping on their crop fields, the almost questioning tilt of its great head. "Mama," Myra whispered, "I don't think it wants to hurt us. I think it's trying to understand us." The creature took another step forward, bringing it to within 50 meters of their homes. Its golden eyes swept across the assembled humans, and for a moment that stretched like eternity. 2 species regarded each other across an impossible divide of size, evolution, and understanding. The massive creature stood at the edge of New Sol colony for what felt like hours, though June's chronometer showed only 20 minutes had passed. The colonists remained clustered in their central square, 300 humans facing down a beast that could crush their entire settlement. with casual swipes of its claws. Then the creature moved. It approached the colony's main storage building with careful, measured steps. The structure housed their food supplies, medical equipment, and most importantly, their backup communication systems. Dr. Hannah felt her breath catch as she realized what might happen next. The beast extended one massive claw toward the building's roof. The colonists tensed, ready to scatter, but the creature's movement was surprisingly controlled. Instead of tearing through the structure, it carefully peeled away a section of metal sheeting, exposing the interior without causing the building to collapse. "It's being precise," Hannah whispered to June. "Look at how controlled that movement was." The creature peered into the opened building, its golden eyes scanning the contents. It made a low rumbling sound, almost like it was speaking to itself, then moved to the next structure. Again, it opened the building with surgical precision, examined what was inside, then moved on. "It's searching for something," Seoke observed, his engineer's mind trying to understand the pattern. "But what?" the beast continued, its methodical inspection of their settlement. Unlike the stories they had heard from other worlds about rampaging monsters, this creature seemed to be conducting an investigation. It examined their solar collectors, studied their water purification systems, even inspected their small workshop where Seoke repaired their equipment. But the colonists' calm began to crack when the creature approached the residential area. Families with small children started backing away, preparing to flee despite June's earlier instructions to stay together. The beast noticed their movement immediately. Its great head swiveled toward the retreating humans, and for the first time, it made a sound directed at them, a deep, commanding roar that froze everyone in place. Then it did something that made Hannah's scientific training clash with her survival instincts. The creature moved to one of the smaller storage containers near the residential buildings and, with deliberate force, knocked it over. The container spilled open, scattering its contents across the ground. Children's toys rolled across. The dirt handmade dolls that the colony's parents had crafted. Carved wooden animals, colorful blocks made from local minerals, and small books with pictures that helped teach the youngest colonists to read. The beast examined these items with the same intense focus it had given their technology. It picked up one of the carved animals, a small wooden horse, no bigger than its smallest claw, and held it up to the light. The contrast was almost absurd, this massive predator, delicately handling a child's toy. Most of the adults were too terrified to move, but Myra found herself stepping forward. Her mother's hand tightened on her shoulder, but the girl pulled gently free. "Mira, no," Hannah whispered urgently. But Mira continued walking toward the creature, her small feet crunching on the scattered toys. The beast's golden eyes fixed on her, and that deep rumbling sound returned, rising from somewhere deep in its chest. The child stopped just 3 meters from the massive creature. Up close, she could see the intricate patterns in its black scales, the way its claws curved like polished obsidian, the incredible intelligence burning in those golden eyes. She felt no fear, only curiosity, and something else, a strange sense of recognition. The creature lowered its great head until it was level with hers, studying this tiny human who showed no terror. Its breathing was deep and controlled, and Myra could feel the warmth radiating from its massive body. Then Mira did something that would be talked about in the colony for generations to come. She looked directly into those burning golden eyes and spoke in the clear, firm voice that her mother used when training their dogs. "Set." The word hung in the air, like a physical thing. The creature's rumbling stopped completely. Its massive head tilted slightly, as if processing not just the word but the tone, the confidence, the complete lack of fear in the small human's voice. For a moment that seemed to stretch forever, neither moved. 300 colonists held their breath, watching as their youngest member stared down a creature that could destroy armies. Then, with movements so slow and careful they seemed almost reverent, the massive beast lowered its body to the ground, its powerful legs folded beneath it, its great bulk settling into a seated position with surprising grace. It continued to watch Myra, but the aggressive tension had left its posture completely. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of wind through the settlements, solar collectors, and the distant calls of native birds in the forest. Every human in the colony stood frozen, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Dr. Hannah found her voice first, though it came out as barely a whisper. "How did she?" Myra turned back toward the adults, her face bright with excitement rather than fear. "I think it was just confused," she said simply. "It didn't know how to talk to us, so it was trying to show us how strong it was. But that's not how you make friends." She turned back to the seated creature, which continued to watch her with those intelligent golden eyes. "You're not scary," she told it gently. "You're just really, really big." 3 days had passed since Myra first commanded the massive creature to sit, and the settlement had transformed into something no one could have imagined. The beast, which Myra had begun calling Guardian, had not left the colony's perimeter. Instead, it had settled into a routine that both amazed and puzzled the human colonists. Each morning, Guardian would position itself at the eastern edge of the settlement, facing the forest where dangerous predators sometimes emerged. The creature's presence had an immediate effect on the local wildlife. The pack of razor wolves that had been troubling their livestock for months had vanished completely. Even the flying serpents that occasionally swooped down to steal chickens now avoided the area entirely. Dr. Hannah spent her days documenting everything, her scientific training warring with the impossibility of what she was witnessing. She watched as Myra approached Guardian with a large water container, something that had become part of their daily routine. "Here you go," Myra said, setting the container down near Guardian's massive head. The creature lowered its snout and drank carefully, its golden eyes never leaving the child's face. What amazed Hannah most was Guardian's learning speed. On the first day, Myra had to repeat commands several times before Guardian understood. By the second day, the creature was responding. 2 simple gestures. Now on the third day, Guardian seemed to anticipate what Myra wanted before she even spoke. "Stay there," Myra told Guardian, pointing toward the settlement's edge. "Don't come into the houses." Guardian rumbled softly, a sound that had lost all traces of threat. The creature remained precisely where Myra had indicated. Even when the delicious smell of cooking food drifted from the residential area, Esiok approached cautiously, carrying his tools. Over the past few days, he had been observing Guardian with an engineer's eye for detail. "Myra," he called softly, "do you think Guardian would help us move that fallen tree?" A storm 2 weeks ago had knocked down a massive native tree that blocked their path to the eastern water source. The colonists had been planning to cut it up piece by piece, a job that would take several days with their limited equipment. Myra looked up at Guardian's enormous form. "Can you move the big tree for us? The one by the water?" Guardian's head turned toward where Esiok was pointing. The creature rose to its feet with fluid grace and walked over to the fallen tree. With surprising gentleness, it grasped the trunk in its powerful jaws and lifted the entire tree as if it weighed nothing. Guardian looked back at Myra, waiting for further instruction. "Put it over there," Myra said, pointing to an empty area. "Away from their paths, we can cut it up for wood later." Guardian carefully placed the massive tree exactly where she had indicated, then returned to its position at the settlement's edge. The entire operation had taken less than 5 minutes. "Incredible," June murmured, watching from a safe distance. "It's not just following orders, it's understanding the purpose behind them." Dr. Hannah had been thinking the same thing. Guardian's behavior showed signs of complex reasoning that went far beyond simple obedience. The creature was learning not just commands, but the social structure of the colony itself. That afternoon brought an unexpected test of Guardian's protective instincts. A family of crystalbacks, large herbivores with sharp defensive spikes, wandered too close to the settlement's crop fields. These animals were normally peaceful, but they could cause significant damage to growing plants if they decided to feed. Guardian noticed them immediately. The creature rose to its feet and made a low, warning call. The crystalbacks looked up, saw the massive predator, and began to back away. But one of the younger animals, perhaps confused or frightened, ran directly toward the residential area where children were playing. Guardian moved with speed that defied its enormous size. It intercepted the crystalback's path, placing itself between the animal and the human children. But instead of attacking, Guardian simply stood there, a living wall of black scales and golden eyes. The crystalback stopped. Recognizing the futility of challenging such a massive opponent, Guardian made another soft rumbling sound, different from its warning call. To everyone's amazement, the smaller animal actually seemed to calm down. Guardian then did something that left the colonists speechless. The massive creature gently nudged the crystalback with its snout, guiding it away from the settlement and back toward its family. Guardian followed at a distance, ensuring the animals reached the forest safely before returning to its post. "It's not just protecting us," Hannah said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's managing the entire ecosystem around our settlement." That evening, as the twin suns set behind the mountains, Myra sat beside Guardian's massive form. The creature had lowered itself to the ground, creating a living windbreak for the child. She leaned against Guardian's warm scales, reading aloud from one of her picture books. The little prince traveled from planet to planet, Myra read, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet evening air. On each world, he met someone new and learned something important about friendship. Guardian's rumbling had become a gentle purr, almost like a giant cat. The creature's eyes remained alert, scanning the horizon for threats. But its attention was clearly focused on the child's voice. Dr. Hannah watched from her laboratory window, making notes in her research journal. What she was documenting would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about intelligence, communication, and the bonds between species. Guardian wasn't just a tamed monster, it was becoming part of their community, a protector who understood not just commands, but the deeper meaning of what it meant to belong. 2 weeks had passed since Guardian first arrived at New Sol Colony, and the bond between the massive creature and 7-year-old Myra had grown stronger each day. What started as simple commands had evolved into something that amazed every adult in the settlement. Guardian didn't just obey Mareth, the creature seemed to understand her thoughts and feelings. The morning routine had become a beautiful dance between child and beast. Myra would wake early and walk to Guardian's resting place at the settlement's edge. The massive creature would lower its great head, and Myra would gently touch the smooth scales between Guardian's golden eyes. This simple contact seemed to communicate more than words ever could. "Good morning, Guardian," Myra would whisper. "Did you sleep well?" Guardian would respond with a soft rumbling that had become as familiar to the colonists as their morning bird songs. The creature had developed different sounds for different meanings, deep rumbles for contentment, higher-pitched calls for alertness, and gentle purrs when Myra was near. Dr. Hannah documented these vocalizations obsessively. Guardian was creating a language, building a bridge between two completely different species. The creature had begun responding, not just to Myra's words, but to her emotional state. When the child was sad, Guardian would position itself to provide comfort. When Myra was excited, Guardian's own energy seemed to rise in response. That morning brought unexpected visitors to their peaceful world. Long-range sensors that June monitored picked up approaching spacecraft, lots of them. The signatures were massive, military-grade vessels that could only belong to the Galactic Council. "They're coming in fast," June reported, his voice tense. 12 battleships and at least 20 support vessels. "They'll be here within the hour." The colonists gathered in their central square, fear replacing the calm they had grown accustomed to. They knew about the mining colony's destruction, about the creature the galaxy had labeled the Warbeast. But their Guardian was different, wasn't it? Guardian sensed the humans' distress immediately. The creature rose to its full height, scanning the sky for threats it couldn't yet see. Its protective instincts were fully engaged, and for the first time in weeks, the colonists remembered just how dangerous their protector could be. "Guardian, it's okay," Myra said, placing her small hand on the creature's leg. "The ships aren't here to hurt us. They're just scared, like everyone was when they first saw you." The massive creature looked down at her, those intelligent golden eyes processing her words. Guardian's aggressive posture relaxed slightly, but it remained alert and ready. The Galactic Council fleet arrived with the thunderous roar of atmospheric entry. Admiral Krex's flagship descended slowly, weapons systems visible but not yet powered. The other ships maintained higher altitudes, clearly prepared for battle, but not yet committed to it. What the Admiral saw through his viewscreen defied every briefing he had received. The settlement below was intact, thriving even, and there, standing protectively at its edge, was the creature that had single-handedly destroyed one of their most fortified colonies. But this Warbeast wasn't rampaging or destroying. It was guarding. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Vex, "our sensors show the creature is in a defensive posture, but it's not attacking. The human settlement appears to be completely unharmed." Admiral Krex studied the readings with growing confusion. "Are the humans prisoners? Hostages?" "No, sir. They appear to be going about normal activities. And there's something elsewhere. Detecting communication between the creature and the humans. Complex communication." The Admiral decided to land, but kept his weapons ready. As his shuttle touched down at the settlement's landing pad, Guardian immediately moved to intercept. The massive creature positioned itself between the newcomers and the human colony, but it didn't attack. Instead, it waited. Myra walked calmly to Guardian's side, showing no fear of either the massive creature or the armed aliens emerging from the shuttle. Admiral Krex had seen many strange things in his military career, but a human child casually approaching a creature that had terrorized the galaxy was beyond his experience. "Guardian, these are guests," Myra said clearly. "They want to make sure we're safe. Show them we're friends." What happened next would be recorded in Galactic Council archives as the most significant moment in interspecies relations history. Guardian slowly lowered itself to the ground, then rolled onto its side, exposing its vulnerable belly. It was the ultimate gesture of trust, something no wild predator would ever do in the presence of potential threats. But Guardian wasn't finished. The creature carefully extended one massive claw toward Myra, who took it in her small hands without hesitation. Then Guardian made a sound none of the colonists had heard before, complex series of rumbles and calls that seemed almost like speech. "It's trying to introduce us," Myra explained to the stunned Admiral. "Guardian is telling you that we're its family, and it wants you to know we're under its protection." Dr. Hannah stepped forward, her research tablet in hand. "Admiral, I've documented everything. Guardian isn't the monster your reports described. It was trying to communicate with the mining colony, but fear and aggression made that impossible. When it found humans who responded with patience instead of weapons, everything changed." Admiral Krex looked from the massive creature to the small child who had somehow tamed it. "How?" he asked simply. Myra smiled and scratched gently behind Guardian's massive ear. Guardian was just lonely and scared, like anyone would be in a strange place with strange people. All it needed was someone to listen and be kind. Guardian purred contentedly, the sound rumbling through the ground like distant thunder. The creature's golden eyes watched the Admiral with curiosity rather than hostility, waiting to see how this new human would respond to friendship.